how to turn any negative situation into an opportunity, how to turn adversity into prosperity. By the end of this video, you're going to understand what adversity really is and how it comes about to be in your reality, and also how to completely change your perception of that adversity to the point where that adversity becomes prosperity. Oh shit, my phone is not on Do Not Disturb, unlike I thought. Give me a second, I'll just change that. Okay, so first things first. Before I actually go into this, I want to just shine a tiny little bit of light upon my new weekly newsletter. With this newsletter, I am essentially just extrapolating these concepts on a deeper level for anybody who wants to, I guess, delve deeper into the topic. Don't worry, the articles are still practical. They're not just, how do I say this? They're not just something you can use to intellectually wank or masturbate. It's not just intellectual jargon, okay? Now, funny enough, what I'm going to touch upon briefly in this video is also going to be talked about extensively in depth in the article. I'll leave it to you to figure out what it is that's obviously going to be discussed in the article. You'll probably understand and link it to the video by the time you see the title of the article. The newsletter article is going to be in my description, and yeah, let's continue. So first of all, when it comes to understanding how you can turn adversity into prosperity, you have got to realize one thing. The first thing that you've got to realize is that reality isn't what it seems. Physical reality isn't what it seems. When you adopt a perspective from metaphysics meaning beyond the physical. Meta means beyond, and physics is obviously a reference to the physical. The physical reality that you see around you is an illusion. Not an illusion in the idea that it is not real, but rather an illusion in the idea that it is not what it seems to be. What do you mean by that? Go Paul, what the fuck are you talking about? What do you mean it's not a... I'm going to get into that, okay? Our eyes only see 0.0035% of reality because our eyes can only see visible light on the electromagnetic spectrum. And visible light is the lowest level on the electromagnetic spectrum, meaning that there are invisible forces at play here which we cannot perceive with our eyes anyway. So, what are these invisible forces at play? They are the spiritual plane, the mental plane. That's it. Now, in regards to the spiritual plane and the mental plane, you probably sort of already know what I'm talking about, especially if you watch my videos, because I've probably even said that exact same sequence a multitude of times. But yeah, the spiritual plane is where your soul resides, the mental plane is where your subconscious mind resides, and obviously the physical plane is where, you know, your physical body and the physical reality that you live in reside. Now, we have been conditioned to believe that the physical plane is the only thing that matters. Take a physical action and it leads to a physical result or physical outcome. Now, when you begin to understand the illusion, which is that the physical plane is not a causal realm, meaning that whatever happens within the physical is just a result of what is already internal. And when we say internal, we're just referring to the spiritual and the mental plane. Your subconscious mind literally controls like 95 to 99% of your actions. That comes down to the automatic breathing, the way you move your muscles, your heart pumping blood around your body. Your subconscious mind is literally what controls all of that, and most of your habits that you do unconsciously, that you do automatically. Now, within this triune reality that we reside in, there are also 7 different laws that govern this reality. I'm going to briefly explain all of them. Not explain all of them. I'm going to briefly tell you and explain all of them, but there are 2 we're going to be hyper focusing on. The first law is the law of mentalism. This is the law and the truth that everything is mental, everything is consciousness. And it becomes easy to picture that when you realize that every single thing you see in your reality around you was first mental before it became physical. And mental and physical aren't really that different. I'm going to touch upon that later. You'll understand when I explain the next law. But the first law is the law of mentalism. And it becomes easy to conceptualize this idea when you realize that all of the things you see around you, right, whether that's nature, whether that's the buildings around you, whether that's that hat behind me, whether that's this microphone that I'm using, it was all a mental image within someone's mind before it was first in reality. Yes, mankind did not create grass or trees. God created grass or trees and animals. Before it was physical, it was first mental within the mind of God. Cool. After that, you have the law of vibration. Now, remember how I said that the physical and the mental and also the spiritual are much different. What I mean by that is that they are all the exact same thing, just at different degrees of vibration. Because the law of vibration is the truth that every single thing is moving. Nothing is completely still. Up to the planets circulating the sun, down to the electrons circulating the nucleus within an atom. Everything is always moving. Now, it may seem like certain things are still, but think about it this way. Whenever you see a wheel, right? Imagine a wheel on a car or just a wheel in general, and that wheel is being spun and spun and spun and spun. You see how the wheel begins to seem as if it is completely still when it reaches incredibly high speeds. There you go. There it is. Now you're clocking onto what I'm saying now, innit? Every single thing around you, despite how still it seems, whether it's the toast and egg you're eating every morning or that one piece of, I don't know, shoes that you've been trying to buy, or that money that you're trying to get, even the paper, the money that you hold, every single thing is vibrating. Every single thing is moving. Nothing is completely still. Now, the next law is the law, doesn't really matter. Just because I may have messed up the order a little bit, the order doesn't matter as long as you know all of them. So the third law is the law of correspondence. Now, the law of correspondence is simply the truth that every single thing has its corresponding equivalent on every single plane, if that makes sense. Whatever is within is without. Whatever is above is below. As above, so below. As within, so without. Whatever is on the internal, spiritual and mental, gets extrapolated, expressed onto the external, the physical. Now, after the law of correspondence, which really should have been the second law before vibration, anyway, after the law of correspondence, you have the law of polarity. Now, this is one of the important laws. This is one of the two laws that we're going to zoom into in this video. The law of polarity is the law that the truth that every single thing is a law as well, but the truth that every single thing has its corresponding opposite. Happy, sad, calm, anxious, anger, relaxation. Every single thing has its corresponding opposite, down to the physical, down to the spiritual, up to the spiritual, even on the mental, in regards to emotions. On the physical, you have dull, sharp, noise, quiet, strength, weakness. Even in regards to concepts, every single yin has its yang. Now, this means that if you are within poverty, you are on the pole of poverty. If you are on the pole of wealth, you're on the pole of wealth. Now, obviously, that's, simple, self-explanatory. But this is one thing that you can realize utilizing this truth, that you can come to an understanding utilizing this truth. Think about it this way, right? On a thermometer, the highest temperature on a thermometer, all right, we're going to switch that thermometer and rotate it to the angle where it's basically a straight line. Now, imagine this right side is where it's extremely hot and this left side is where it's extremely cold. Now, this is this going to be your left and this is going to be your right? I think it will be. Anyway, now imagine that this left side is cold, this right side is hot. Now, this left side, you go down to the coldest point. It is still the same thing, just at what? a different degree. The lowest level of cold, the highest level of cold is just the lowest level of heat. And the highest level of heat is just the lowest level of cold. The darkest of darks is just the lowest level of brightness. The most poor of poverty is just the least of wealth. The most of wealth is just the least of poverty. Sorry, I am tweaking a little bit when I'm explaining this, but I know that you understand what I'm trying to say here. Just because you're at one side of the pole does not mean you are still not in alignment with the other. Does not mean that you cannot shift from that pole to the other side, because all you are at is just the lowest level of your desired side. That is all it is. And even at the other side, all you are at is just the lowest level of your undesired side, of the side you don't desire, and you're at the highest level of the side that you do desire. So when it comes to polarity, the whole point with understanding this truth is to realize that it is about what one calls mental transmutation. And what mental transmutation is the idea of changing your mental state to shift from one pole to another. Now, reference back to the law of mentalism quickly. That one might even be also, I guess, might make it 3 laws. Anyways, reference back to the law of mentalism. The law of mentalism is what? I keep saying the law. The truth that every single thing in reality is consciousness. That the universe is consciousness. That every single thing you see around you was first mental imagery within God's mind before it became any sort of physical equivalent. Now, if every single thing is consciousness, right, up from the spiritual down to the physical, and the only thing separating it being the degrees of vibration, doesn't that mean that man has the ability to change his reality using mental transmutation, using conscious control over his mind or her mind, one's mind? Anyway, now the final law, not the final law, but the final law that is going to be talked about in a sort of depth for this video specifically in regards to changing adversity into prosperity. And that is the law of rhythm. Now, the law of rhythm is simply the idea that there is always going to be a shift from one side of the pole to another. There was always going to be a turning of yin to yang and yang to yin. It is never ever going to be one side of the pole forever. It is never going to be, you are never going to be happy all the time. You're never going to be sad all the time. You're not going to be calm all the time. You're not going to be frustrated all the time. You're not going to be scared all the time. You're not going to have low self-confidence all the time. You're not going to have high self-confidence all the time. There's always going to be a shift from one side of the pole to another. And understanding this helps you realize that, okay, cool, that is the nature of reality. But at the same time, what you can do is you can make it so that before a pendulum swing happens from one side to the other, you stay at your desired side as much as you possibly can before you eventually shift back to that undesired pole, to the pole that you don't want to be at. And even when you do shift to that pole that you don't want to be at, through self-mastery over your mind and conscious control over your mental processes, specifically your emotions, you can shift from one side of the pole to the other and make it so that you stay at the pole, and make it so that you're barely at the pole that you don't want to be at. And boom, that is essentially it encompassed. Now, obviously, for the sake of, explaining all of the 7 laws, I'm going to tell you about the last 2. The last 2 are the law of cause and effect. That's my favorite one. And after that, you have the law of gender. Now, the law of cause and effect is simply, okay, cool. It's not what you're thinking, right? Because when you refer to cause and effect, everybody thinks about that, because we learned it in school. Everybody thinks about that one idea where it's basically where whatever physical action you take leads to that specific result, whatever action you take within that specific scientific experiment leads to that result. But from a metaphysical perspective, metaphysical again meaning beyond the physical, because meta means beyond, and physics is a reference to the physical, is that whatever is internal is expressed externally. Kind of similar to the law of correspondence, but it's really more so a focus of what's internal, and the spiritual and the mental planes being the realm of cause and the physical plane being the realm of effect. Now, before I go into the final law, I just want to make one thing clear. Even though the physical is the law of effect, sorry, not the law of effect, is the plane of effect, it does not mean that it is not important. Like I said, it is not an illusion in the idea that it is not real, but rather it is an illusion in the idea that it is not as it seems. It is not what it seems to be. And what I mean by it's not what it seems to be is that a lot of the time, people will think that the reason why they're not able to achieve something is because they're taking the wrong physical actions. Or someone will be confused as to why they're taking all the correct physical actions but not achieving what it is that they want. Quick example. This is an example that I've used before, and it's an example that I love to use because it's an example that even I myself have related to before. And that is the example of going to the gym. How many people do you know that will say they're going to start going to the gym? Maybe it's New Year's. They say, okay, cool. I'm going to lock in, going to start going gym. You yourself say, I'm going to lock in, start going gym. And what happens is you do go gym for about 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, maybe even 2 months. Hell, maybe even 3 months. Okay, you go gym for that certain amount of time. And then all of a sudden you just fall off. And you're like, what the fuck? What's going on? I was so consistent. I was so this, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And the reason why that happens is even though an effect cannot affect an effect, what will happen is you will take physical action to change something without first changing the internal, and it will begin to seem like things are changing without anything ever being changed. Because yeah, cool, maybe the effects can change an effect, but it's only temporarily. It is not eternal like what it would be if it was already internal. Now, what I mean by this is you're essentially trying to break past your frequency, your state of consciousness, your identity. All phrases interchangeable for the same thing, meaning the same thing. All right. Now, cool. The issue here, like I've said, is that you're trying to break past your identity with physical action. You can't do that. What you need to do is first work on the internal, and then as a result, that will fix the external actions that you're trying to take. You cannot take an action of fitness while being in the state of consciousness of unfitness. You cannot take an action in the realm of wealth while being in the state of poverty. You cannot take an action for abundance while in the state of consciousness of scarcity. That is simply it. And the key to all of it, like I said, is utilizing the law of cause and effect. And that is the law where you change the causal, the internal, which then reflects onto the external. Now, without going, because obviously this video isn't about like that too tough, you get me? So we're not gonna deep delve into that law a bit, like you get what I'm saying? All right, cool. Sorry about that. I do get a bit excited when I talk about these topics. I actually, like, it puts a smile on my face making these videos, like, because one, I'm not gonna lie, I do like how I'm able to, just talk about these concepts and extrapolate them, I guess, well, and how you're able to understand what I'm saying. But also at the same time, it's like, it's also kind of beautiful to see the progression, because if you go to my old videos, right, bro, I not barely knew what I was talking about, but it was like I didn't really know how to explain it properly, right? I didn't know how to. It was just a speaking issue, really. It was just an issue of translating what was going on in my mind and then, expressing that well outwardly with my mouth. Pause. So now, the final law, the law of gender, and this is just the simple truth that there are masculine and feminine energies within everything within reality. A simple example of this is, actually, you know what? I'm not going to tell you the example. You're going to have to find the example in my article. Sorry, guys. But anyways, because obviously I'm not trying to go too deep into these laws, all right? Because the main thing that I'm trying to get here is the two laws that we need to focus on, and those are the laws of polarity and rhythm. Now, finally, yeah, we're getting to the good stuff now. Sorry, I did kind of, give you guys a bit of a tangent there when I was explaining all the laws. How to turn that adversity into prosperity. Now, like I said, you need to understand what the adversity is first. Now, utilizing these laws that I've extrapolated to you, you can begin to understand or conceptualize what the adversity actually is. So, the adversity is simply just a negative emotion, or rather, emotion that you have labeled as negative, which then is therefore given a negative power within your reality. Cool. So, first of all, you have got to put on what I like to call a metaphysical lens. You've got to put on those meta glasses. You've got to put on some meta glasses, alright? And what I mean by that is when adversity hits you, you've got to respond to it instead of reacting. Now, responding to it is simply understanding that what is happening to you right now is an illusion. Okay, the adversity that is currently within your life is an illusion. What it is simply your old frequency, old identity, old state of consciousness. Like I said, different ways of saying the same thing, trying to perpetuate you being stuck in that reality you don't want to be in anymore. Or sometimes it's simply just the pendulum swinging. Cool. When you understand this, you begin to understand what you need to do. First of all, you need to relax. Take some time to sit on a bed or on a chair and relax. Understand what that adversity is really trying to do to you, or what that adversity really is. It's not what it seems. Like I said, the physical plane is an illusion. So you can choose to let that adversity then decide your reality, or you can choose to not let it decide your reality and actually change the adversity in itself, or change the adversity in itself into prosperity. Now, how you can do that is simply by realizing one thing. Remember how I said within polarities, right? One side of the pole is literally just the least of the other side. The highest level of heat is simply just the lowest level of cold. The highest level of cold is simply just the lowest level of heat. Doesn't that then mean that the highest level of adversity is simply just the lowest level of prosperity? And in that case, that means there is a hidden seed of prosperity hidden within that adversity that you can utilize. How you can utilize it is by simply focusing your attention upon it, because where your attention goes, energy will begin to grow. Place your attention upon that hidden seed, and then that seed, which has the potential to develop into a tree, a large, prosperous tree, obviously I'm speaking metaphorically here, will then be given the watering that it needs to sprout and blossom. So, because it might seem like I'm talking in parables here, I'm just going to make it practical, because that's what I like to do with my videos and my articles and any piece of information or media that I'm going to create in the future. I just like to keep it practical, because within this space there's a lot of fluff, there's a lot of bullshit, there's a lot of do this, that is, like, get dreads, what else, be a vegetarian, eat acai bowls, go on a fast, blah blah blah. Just a multitude of things that focus on the physical. And what you need to understand is that when it comes to creating your reality, I don't even want to say creating your reality, because really and truly what it is isn't creating your reality, it's rather selecting your reality out of all the realities that exist. But without going off on a tangent there, like I said, when it comes to this stuff, a lot of people like to focus on the physical, right? They like to say, walk a different way, talk a different way, things of that nature. Get this hairstyle, get that hairstyle, eat this way, eat that way. And what they are missing is the whole point of this is that it is literally called metaphysics. Why it's called metaphysics is because you're going beyond the physical, and the entire focus is on the inner realms. The entire focus is on your mental. The entire focus is on your base emotions, your daily attitudes, your mental processes. That is what it is based on. Your beliefs, that is what it is based on. And a belief, contrary to popular opinion, is not a thought that you think a multitude amount of times. A belief is rather just a thought or a multitude of thoughts that is given emotion and conviction. Now, Emotion stands for energy in motion. In regards to emotion, emotion is the language of your subconscious mind. It is the only language that your subconscious mind speaks. It is not thoughts, it is emotion. That is the language of your subconscious mind. Now, without going off on a tangent, cool. Making it practical, because I did say I was going to do that before I went off on that tangent. Anyway, so what you're going to do, right, is you're going to respond to this situation instead of reacting to it. Now, what I mean by this is, first, you remind yourself of the fact that the physical is an illusion. And when you remind yourself of the fact that the physical is an illusion, you then begin to think to yourself, okay, cool. So what do I need to do then in order for this adversity to be turned into prosperity? And what you do is you ask yourself questions, because self-awareness, really all it is asking yourself questions about yourself. And what will happen when this adversity hits, right, is it will attempt to shut down your higher levels of thinking. How it does this is by making you hyper focus on the negativity of your reality, or the potential of negativity within your reality. Most of the times it's just you suffering more in imagination than in reality. I cannot remember who said that quote, but I know it was someone important that I guess has popular appeal. I forgot his name, I'm sorry. Okay, anyway, no disrespect of course. Anyway, like I was saying, you're going to hyper focus on the potential of negativity within your reality after this event of adversity hits. And when it hits, the key to responding is by not allowing your high levels of thinking to be short-circuited, and allowing yourself to develop a sense of self-awareness by asking yourself the question, wow, my voice is going for like 5 seconds, I don't know what happened there. Asking yourself the question, what would the person living in my desired reality, or living in that prosperous situation, even think about what is currently happening to me? Right? How would they feel about it? How would they see it? What would their perception? What would be their perception in regards to it? Now, that's one thing that you can do if it's like something where, if it's a situation where you can't really, just sit on a bed or just chair or relax on a bed, and then you just, go into, just into relaxed state. But in the case in which you can do that, like I said, first things first, relax. And once you have relaxed, right? How to relax actually, because I'm saying relax, but you might even be confused as to what I'm talking about when I'm saying relax. It becomes easier to relax when you actually pinpoint where the emotion that you're feeling is really being felt. Because contrary to, I guess, the global consensus, we don't really only have emotion or feeling within our mind as we think. A quick example of this is when you feel fear, you actually feel it in like your chest or like your solar plexus area, which is why a lot of the time people will say like, oh, I felt like my heart dropped. And that is because there are literally neurons in, the solar plexus area of your body that, I guess, where you can feel things, feel emotions. With this in mind, you then begin to realize what you need to do. Like I said, pinpoint that emotion, place your hand on your solar plexus if you're feeling that anxiety there, and just feel that emotion. Completely detach from the idea of that emotion being negative, and realize that the emotion is simply just energy. Because like I said, emotion is energy in motion. Now, after you have realized this, begin to then feel it as much as you possibly can. Because the problem with emotion when it comes to most people is that a lot of people try to resist it. We are taught to resist emotions because we are told to be rational. But the truth is, every single person is rational right up until the point where their emotions are exploding. Every single human being is completely rational right up until the point where their emotions are exploding. So because you are constantly taught to be rational and logical and have control of your emotions, you kind of see that as a form of denying them. But yes, you can control your emotion, but how you approach controlling it is not by resisting it, but rather feeling it as much as you possibly can. So feel that emotion as much as you possibly can, and allow that emotional energy to dissipate. Allow that emotional energy to be fully felt. Now, as you're allowing it to be fully felt, and as you're seeing it as just energy, you begin to apply neutral attention towards it. And neutral attention attention, sorry, is simply just observing it from a neutral standpoint, okay? And one thing that I like to say is you cannot go from a state of negativity to positivity without first reaching neutrality. That is a gem. Write that shit down. Neutralize those emotions. And then after you have done that, begin to then generate positive ones. Now, how do we do that? How do we do that? It's as simple as understanding what this entire process is with a simple way to simply explain it. It is the 3 R's. The first R is to review. Now, what I mean by review is literally what I told you, where you relax, feel the emotion as much as possible. And then once you have reviewed it, you get to a point where it has now been reframed. Now that it has been reframed because you've applied that neutral attention towards it, after that, you can then recreate. Now, what I mean by recreating is simply just genuinely recreating that scene within your mind. Because you're already in a relaxed state, your subconscious mind, the gateway to it is open, because it's likely that your brainwave state is probably shifting between alpha and theta, and those are the states in which your subconscious mind is incredibly impressionable. Now, recreate the scene to be something that you would like. If the adverse event was simply a family member shouting at you, make it so the family member was being nice to you. If the adverse event was a low bank account, make it a higher bank account. Or you can utilize memories, because one thing that you need to know about the subconscious mind is that it cannot conceptualize a past or a future, meaning that it only knows the present. So even all of the memories that you withhold that have strong emotional intensity connected to them, all of those memories are actually present moments constantly replaying in your subconscious mind. That is why a lot of the time people will say that you should look into your childhood traumas in order for you to gain a better understanding of your reality, which they are not wrong in at all. They're completely correct. But by doing that, people do forget that what emotional trauma is nothing but emotional intensity. So they will hyper focus on their childhood, and then forget about the rest of their life, not knowing that even though it maybe didn't happen in your childhood, because of how intense the emotion was that was generated due to the adverse event, it could still have been something that was impressioned into your subconscious mind, even though you weren't a kid. Anyway, now, like I said, that's it. Review, reframe, recreate. That is how you turn the situation of adversity into prosperity. By either 1, finding the hidden seed. You can actually do both, to be honest. By either 1, finding the hidden seed of prosperity within it, because the highest level of adversity is simply just the lowest level of prosperity. 2, responding instead of reacting. The first one is also responding instead of reacting, but yeah, responding instead of reacting, by taking that time to relax and taking that time to review the adversity, reframe the adversity, and then finally recreate the adversity to the point where it becomes prosperity. And yeah, that is it for today's video. But yeah, I will see you guys later, and I hope you all have a great week. Don't forget to read my article, if you want to. If you don't want to, don't read it. Simple as that. Bye bye.